Thank you very much. Great being here. Yeah, let's kick it off, and we talk about the topic of the day, more or less. It's tokenization, which we all believe will be one of the buzzwords for 2023 at least. Let me get on stage our panelists. First of all, Michael Duttlinger from CashLink. Please join us and give us a short introduction on who you are and what your organization is doing.
Yes, so happy to be here and being part of the panel. I'm Michael Duttlinger, CEO and co-founder of CashLink. With CashLink, we are providing the leading infrastructure for the tokenization of assets and securities. We are also acting as financial institutions under the preliminary license as a crypto securities registrar in Germany under the new EWPG law. We have done the most tokenizations in Germany so far with our infrastructure, and our clients range from leading investment platforms like Vivin up to Hauck & Aufhäuser, Bankhaus Scheich or Deutsche Bank. And happy to be part of here today and talk about tokenization and regulation.
Great, perfect. Next one is Volker Braunberger from Intas and founder of Funds on Chain. Volker, please join us and give us a short introduction about you and your aspirations and your company.
Yeah, thank you. Warm welcome even from my side. My name is Volker Braunberger. Braunberger is quite German. As Moritz mentioned, I'm the CEO of Intastech. Intastech is a consulting company with a clear focus on the supporting of financial institutions for blockchain use cases, to elaborate on them, to make pre-studies and implement them, not only from a functional basis, but also from a technology perspective. Myself, I'm over 20 years acting as a management consultant with a pure focus on the investment fund industry, and that led me to another company that has been mentioned by Moritz. It's Funds on Chain. It's a software as a service provider which will be able to handle tokenized fund shares, what's also a kind of a security end-to-end to bring the investment fund industry, which I do see as one of the significant use cases for blockchain, into the next level of digitalization. And I'm very glad to be here, part of the first panel, and set the benchmark for today.
Great, thank you. Next one is Amadeus Grieger from VPEX or WebEx? How would you pronounce it? WebEx. Please take a mic and give a short introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Moritz. Pleasure to be here, being on the stage. My name is Amadeus Grieger. I work for WPEX, which stands originally for Wertpapierexperten, a Frankfurt-based consulting firm. We do consulting within the whole securities value chain, but also strongly focusing on asset management. Since 6 years, we're also doing advisory in blockchain digital assets. So we basically consult our clients that are banks, asset managers, stock exchanges, and the like, in regulation, use cases, and also implementation. And thank you.
Great, thank you very much. The fourth on the panel here is Sebastian Day. He's a lawyer with Linklaters and is head of digital assets. Sebastian, please give us a short introduction about you and your firm.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Moritz, for that. That's pretty much my CV done. As head of digital assets for Linklaters Germany, my team and I, we are advising clients on a variety of products. So we are looking for DLT solutions for traditional capital markets products, but we're also advising on DLT native products as such. And we're looking pretty much along the whole chain. As lawyers, we look at the documentation, in particular, looking at what digital legal documentation can bring to the table, and we'll elaborate on that. We're also looking at issuances, we're looking at trading, clearing, settlement, and also custody, and I'm really excited to be back here at the Crypto Asset Conference.
Great, thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Gundas Ostrovskis from the European Commission. He's team lead and he is with us online. Gundas, do you hear us? And maybe you can give us a short introduction to you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm very sorry that I can't be in Frankfurt today, but I'm joining you from Brussels, and I will be very happy to contribute to this panel. I work at the Digital Finance Unit of the Directorate General that is responsible for financial services at the European Commission. Obviously, I don't think the European Commission needs any further introduction. We are drafting legislation in the financial sector, and we have actually also produced the recent pieces of legislation on crypto assets, including the markets in crypto assets regulation and the DLT pilot regime. So I'm looking forward to discussing these elements with you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. As you can see, we have a high caliber panel today. And let me try to just, first of all, start with tokenization. And frankly, for me, the first idea of tokenization was when a guy from a French startup told me that he wanted to tokenize art. And he had the vision of putting the Mona Lisa into small pieces and sell it to retail investors. And I think that was the initial first step where people were thinking about issuing tokens that had a kind of underlying. And then more and more this concept of tokenizing something evolved, and more the regulators started saying, hey, come on guys, sometimes this might be some kind of a financial investment. And I do remember that the German regulator BaFin once at a conference said, yes, we see that there are tokens that might look like a financial security, and they called it WPA. WPA, Wertpapierähnliche Token, and everybody felt like, oh, BaFin is looking into it. Let's try to stay beneath the radar and try to issue tokens that don't fall into this regime, because it's really getting complicated. And then the next step was more or less that regulators started saying, well, there might be certain cases where it makes sense to have something tokenized and we'll treat it as a security. And then there was a switch, and many players started saying, well, instead of trying to issue something that represents some kind of asset but it's not regulated, maybe it makes sense to get into that regime. And I think that's where we stand today, that we have a total of, I think, 140 million, WebEx just published a study on that, 140 million euros in tokenized securities under the EWPG. And that leads to my first question, maybe to you, Michael. Where do we stand? We have started to attract even companies like Siemens to issue tokenized securities. Is it the very beginning? Are we now at the kind of flip point to really get into it, or are we extremely early?
Yeah, so I think over the last 4 years, the space has massively evolved. So as you said at the beginning, it was about tokenizing alternative assets, art, real estate, collectibles, solar parks, wind parks, infrastructure. And now we're really moving into a new capital markets infrastructure. And what we see, the tipping point, is regulation. Because in Germany, we have now the most advanced regulation of tokenization worldwide. If you look at the big countries, G20 probably, and this is really attracting business. So as soon as the law came out, the law gave legal certainty, and this gave investment certainty. So this was the starting point for all these financial institutions, like you mentioned, the Siemens one, or also Deutsche Bank did one. If you look at the registrar on BaFin.de, they're all looking into it. They have now the clarity, the regulatory clarity, and in this case, it's really a driver for the whole ecosystem, that the government and the really pushed this pushed this so much, and I think here it's at the beginning. They're all doing a lot of pilot projects, and what we see over the next years is that these pilot projects will really turn into normal business. This will take some while. What we also see is that we have clients and requests from all over Europe, that they now saying that UK bankers are saying, oh, we want to do our issuances now in Frankfurt because the regulation is better. We have from Netherlands, from France, so they're all coming to Germany saying they want to tokenize here, and that's why especially these landmark transactions like Siemens or then Deutsche Bank show us, okay, we're really going to a more mature level, higher issuances, and yeah, of course we are at Cashing are happy that we supported both issuances with our technical infrastructure. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I really see now more pilot projects, and then moving forward into more integrating into existing systems.
Okay. Amadeus, you compiled this study with the different issuances, and what we can see is that the large issuances this had been private placements, essentially to institutionals, and then there are a bunch of very, very small kind of MVP kind of things that went into retail. What's more relevant, to get the institutionals into it, or what's your view if you look at the entire market, to Amadeus?
Also, ja.
Sorry, Michael. You can add if you want. I would absolutely agree with what Michael said before, that if we look at the volumes that were issued as of today, we see that 130 million have been issued, but this year alone it were 100 million. So issuances like Siemens, for example, are of course very, very important milestones. They're pretty large. It's a DAX company. Other companies that were issuing before were more smaller companies, and now this is a major milestone. And what we also see in our we look at our clients, that everyone is interested in how to issue via blockchain, leverage the EWPG, leverage crypto securities, but more and more are a bit afraid, sort of really afraid of the license that is necessary. So I think if you want to attract more issuers, if you look at bank issuers, maybe the license would, or the requirements for license have to be lowered down a bit.
Okay.
And if I may add, can you hear me? Yeah. Yep. I would see it a little bit the other way around, because I totally agree that we have a brilliant regulation here in place, but this is just a basis. What I do still, and I think what I do miss, even from a consulting perspective, is an efficient implementation from the legal authority. We are supporting currently numerous financial institutions which are confused by now. If they need for something, they want to tokenize or register, do they need a license, yes or no? And by now, we have really, from my view, a problem, at least in Germany, that we have a good regulation, but the implementation of it, it's too slow. And that becomes, from my perspective, from a neutral perspective of the market, more and more roadblocker. The best regulation does not help if you can't implement it, because established financial institutions get no answer from BaFin, for instance, or they have to wait 18 months for a license for crypto custody or for crypto registry. And this is a strong call for action from this side. I hope that somebody from the BaFin is here. And therefore, I think we should end up with a celebration of ourselves that we issued 100x million. That's, to be honest, it's nothing in comparison to the rest of the market. It's a first very, very small step into the new world of infrastructure. And we have you, that's a brilliant position for the starting point, as you as one of the, I think, 3 registries we have currently in Germany with a license. That is not enough to bring this to mass adoption for institutional and retail clients. And this is my message, even from a consulting perspective, that we have to increase the speed, because otherwise the German market will lose the brilliant position we have by now. That's my view on that.
Maybe we hand it over to Sebastian. What's your experience with the BaFin and the regulatory environment?
Well, I actually just wanted to say, whilst it seems to be slow, another element to be taken into account at this stage is we are moving from something everyone's used to, pretty much paper-based, to a technology that is comparatively new, and people need to get used to it. And so I think whilst speed would be good to have, at the same time we need to balance it with making sure that what we are going to implement is going to hold up for those bigger issuance sizes. Hence, what we're currently seeing is getting our hands dirty, getting used with the new technology. So the issuance sizes are comparatively small, probably not useful for refinancing purposes. But all that said, once we get the documentation and the technology in place, it doesn't matter whether we will add a couple of zeros at the end, because the technology will remain the same. So while speed, yes, is nice to move things along, I think it needs to be balanced or to be struck a balance with making sure that the technology and the requirements are in place. And quite frankly, the way we see it, we are working with the regulators to get them to the point where they understand what we're doing. So it's a back and forth rather than saying, this is what we're going to do. Please say, yes, here's the license, you can do it. So it's a learning procedure. And I think that's one of the key messages that we wanted to bring to the table today. It's a give and take. It's an exchange that's quite important.
I'd like to ask Brussels for your view. People say that Germany tends to be a front runner in terms of regulating the crypto environment. I don't know if that's true from your European perspective. However, my understanding is that the regulator has changed its view and it's getting more and more supportive and trying to really create a framework that helps Europe to become relevant in this next wave of digitalization. Is that your view as well, Gandus?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say that we have really substantially changed our view. I think, of course, it depends on whom you ask in the European Commission, and also, obviously, if you talk to the supervisors, then you may also get a different view. But of course, as I said, I work in the digital finance unit. In the digital finance unit, we've always been kind of supportive of innovation, whilst, of course, keeping squarely or wanting to keep squarely risks in check. So in that sense, we certainly haven't been in favor of the approach that the US has been taking, with kind of enforcement action on the one hand and regulatory uncertainty on the other. I think for us it was clear from the very outset that sooner or later you need to provide some regulatory certainty, and of course, as part of any kind of legislative proposal, there's always trade-offs to be respected and balance to be found. But I think we're certainly very happy that now last week the DLT pilot regime has come into force, because it will provide this possibility for experimentation on the one hand to the industry. On the other hand, it will also inform our own views on what kind of adjustments may be needed to the EU financial regulatory framework to accommodate these new technologies. And obviously, there are indeed national regimes in place in Germany and also in France and other countries, but the difference between, of course, the national regime and the DLT pilot is that when you are authorized as part of the DLT pilot, you actually can operate across the EU. That is, I think, the big difference. And at the same time, it is clear that it is an experimental regime. It is not a regime, also partly due to the restrictions that have been built into the regime in terms of volumes. It is not a regime that can already be put in full production. And I think these kind of investments into building something as part of this regime will probably have to rather be taken as research budgets as opposed to obviously business investment, which has to compete with other business cases across firms.
Fair enough, thank you. For those who are not so familiar, this DLT regime is something that has been launched last week, and it's a so-called sandbox. So the European Commission is promoting a system where trading venues for digital securities can be set up without using all applicable laws and being kind of released from certain thresholds and restrictions. Let's move to the product side. When we look at what we have seen in securities so far, it's only bonds, and particularly the Siemens thing is something that's absolutely plain vanilla. So there's no special feature about it. This is issued daily in the traditional markets, and only because this goes without paper and instead of that it's digital, this is not really sexy. I mean, what do we need to see in terms of digital securities to make them attractive, particularly for the institutional market, and what kind of products will we see? Volker, maybe what are the next steps?
I would add something to the Siemens, and you help me perhaps. I think it was very attractive, even from an outside perspective. Why? Because you reduced the value chain significantly. I think the first time, at least, and I'm 20 years in this market, where an asset manager who invested in such a bond has the chance to get direct in touch with the issuer. That means we disrupt at least the investment bank in between, the broker or the market maker, and there could be saved, I assume, anything between 15 and 30 basis points for the investment manager, and that's significant. And what I then do miss in such press releases, we should focus on the benefits of tokenization. An investor is not interested in blockchain and tokenization that are buzzwords. I think we should focus on the benefits we could generate there. Disrupt intermediaries in this case, even if it was a classical issuing, and saving costs. That's, I think, for sure a pretty advantage of this, I would say, classical plain vanilla issuing. But perhaps you want to add something else.
Yes, totally agree. The major advantage is just we have more efficiency and cutting costs. And this is for the whole market. If you look at we did some studies, it's somehow between 30, some say 30 or 60% if you look at the whole life cycle. So it's a massive reduction of costs. But this is only the advantage now. When we look at the advantage which will happen if the space is evolving, it's okay, when we have money on chain, we can do deliver versus payment automatically. When we have identity on chain, we can way more easily share identities. Everyone has their own identity. If we have more regulation, more asset classes on chain, it gets more interconnectable worldwide. So we'll see also a lot of more new business cases that don't exist. So, for example, if you look at mechanisms that already are in place in the crypto world, for example, automated compounding, that you receive your interest every second. We now receive interest every quarter or every year, but why don't we receive our interest every second and then can automatically reinvest? So there will be a lot of new business cases on top. And here we are really at the beginning. Right now, the advantage is cost cutting, but this is the entry door to way more advantages and way more use cases in the future.
But I mean, there are some disadvantages because these digital securities can't be easily transferred as long as the recipient has not an account with the right registrar. There is no trading venue in existence so far. I mean, there are some obstacles, and if you want to get leverage on that, that might be really tricky to use a digital security as a collateral for some debt, for example.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think we do not have a secondary market. Even such a Siemens issuing is a club deal. I think more or less the buyers were already clear up front, and it's a buy and hold strategy finally. That means for the breakthrough moment of or mass adoption of such tokenization aspects, we do need infrastructure. Perhaps the DLT pilot regime could help, at least if the thresholds are quite small. But nevertheless, we do need to have installed or to install secondary markets where we could then issue such tokenized securities or even fund shares, and to open up new distribution channels for the client. And this is, from my perspective, or I expect there, the moment of the breakthrough and the mass adoption, because currently it's more or less a closed club. We have more or less in the institutional space a securitized, tokenized security, but it's not really open for the retail market by now. And that's, I would totally agree, that is still a lack that we have to close quite quick, because otherwise it will come one proof of concept or one smaller issuing after the other, and this will not help to elaborate the capital market infrastructure.
One quick question for each of you. Please give me a one-sentence answer, starting with Sebastian. Looking at the market in Germany so far, which one is the single most interesting tokenization project you have seen, and why is it the case that you look at it as a lighthouse project?
I'd go with the Swiat platform developed by DekaBank and Swiat, reason being that it is a platform which allows for a broad range of products. It brings a lot of expertise to the market from the traditional capital markets. Furthermore, it's a platform which has already launched different types of products which do not specifically necessarily fall within the new regime, but they have done that as well. And the final element that I think is quite interesting to look into the project is it's open to all market participants. So it's not a closed shop, it's something that goes out, and it has been around for quite some time. So it's actually a project worthwhile checking out.
This was a single sentence, and lawyers do quite well in putting lots of words into it. Amadeus, what's your lighthouse project?
I'll make it shorter, Sebastian, I promise. No, I would go with Hauck Aufhäuser Lampe, basically for two reasons. They have all the necessary regulation or licenses already that's needed. They are custodian bank, they are depository, they are crypto custodian as well. They did the biggest issuance so far, so I would go with them.
Michael.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen many interesting cases where we have tokenized in the alternative asset space, and here it's way more advanced for regular business, but for the whole industry, it's probably the big issuances like Siemens, because they bring so much trust into the market, and they are creating way more followers. So this is good for the market.
Volker?
Yeah, I agree with Sebastian. I do see Swide also as the most interesting project because it combines each and everything what blockchain means. It's cooperative, it's open, and it combines the whole value chain for decentralized applications, which will increase step by step on a European level.
Gundas, do you have a project which you particularly like?
Well, I think I will not comment on this since it's a...
Okay.
I will give some kind of preference to one over the others.
Got it. Perfect. Maybe with that, Gundas, what do you think about the potential for Europe? We have seen quite some disruption in the US regarding issuing tokenized instruments. I think the legislation, the regulatory environment is not really friendly in the US. Does Europe have an opportunity, a chance to become really a world-leading player in tokenizing securities?
Well, I mean, we obviously at the Commission certainly would like to hope so, and specifically looking at the situation now, comparing the United States approach versus our approach. Clearly, the United States is the biggest financial market in the world. So in that sense, if they had taken maybe a more, let's say, constructive approach towards tokenization, we would have to compete very hard against them. At the moment, it is not entirely clear where it will end up in the US. I mean, I was still at another conference in Paris last week or 2 weeks ago. And there were a lot of industry players from the US also, kind of expressing their frustration and saying that they are actually seriously considering relocation to Europe or other jurisdictions. Obviously, as I said, I think vis-a-vis US, we stand at the moment quite favorably in terms of regulatory outlook. When it comes to other jurisdictions, clearly there are also regulatory frameworks in other jurisdictions and also regulatory frameworks that are being developed. But then I clearly have to note that other jurisdictions, the size of the markets in other jurisdictions is not obviously so big as it is in the US and the European Union. Therefore, I think we stand quite good chances in indeed setting a standard and becoming or moving at the forefront of these developments technologically.
I think that's in fact something we as Europe should really strive for. With that, I would like to open up the discussion to the auditorium. Any questions to our panelists? Any other remarks and issues you would like to raise, share with us? Yeah, please.
Sorry, again, please.
Yes, sorry. I would like to hear your opinion about like private or permission chains versus public chains in regards of tokenization.
I think there has been a clear development towards public, or is there anyone in the panel arguing for private chains?
I think it depends. I think for such a issuing like the Siemens, even there could be a permission chain, the right one, but I would always recommend to go with at least Ethereum compatible protocol, so that you are able, if there will come up any secondary market, that you can put it there. Otherwise, it will remain a closed club. That could, for some specific issuances, interesting, but overall, I would always recommend to go more or less in a Ethereum near space.
Yes, I mean, if we see all the transactions, they're all going more public and public. So I think, and we at Cashing are a huge fan of the public blockchain. So we think this is a very good trend. And in the long run, I think we will only see public blockchains, because then you can really make use of the decentralization and you can make use of the full potential of this ecosystem. Nevertheless, in the midterm, we might also see permissioned private chains for issuances that only stay in a closed shop. And that's also good. So that's why, long-term public, midterm both, and short-term also both. And also to add, for example, here, even Deutsche Börse Clearstream, D7, if you look on their website, they also say that they are looking into public as well. So we see all these major institutions also going public.
Maybe one additional question. We touched on cost and efficiency and so on. One thing blockchain stands for is transparency as well. Do you see particular advantages of blockchain-based financial instruments in terms of transparency? How do we look into it, or can dig into it, or look through if it's on blockchain? Are there particular advantages? Maybe you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it has more transparency, and I think this is for the whole market good. If you look at the recent developments in the financial system, transparency might have helped. But also here, I mean, we have GDPR, and there are also still issues to be solved, because I don't want everyone to know all my assets. But nevertheless, more transparency can only be good for the whole market, can be good for the regulator. If you look at AML, it's way better if it's on-chain. And I mean, it cannot be changed. You all can always see the history on-chain. And this, so for manipulating markets, it's also good that we have more transparency.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah.
I would just wanted to add one thing. If you look maybe at the asset management industry, as of now, for most of the asset managers, it's not possible to know who's investing in their funds. And if we are now looking at crypto funds, where they're also possible under Germany Securities Act, asset managers, for the first time, they are able to know who is investing in their products. They don't know the name, but on a pseudonymized basis, they know who's investing in their product. So this is also a major benefit from my perspective.
Cool, thank you. I think with that we have reached our timeline, and thank you to my panelists. This was a great pleasure having you here. Thanks for your insights, and I do hope that everybody got some food for thought out of this discussion. And I think we all are available if you want to get in touch and discuss issues in more detail later on. Wishing you a wonderful day, and thanks for having us.